Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're doing something a little bit different.
Yeah, we are.
Usually we try to take a pretty broad look at a topic, maybe balance a few competing viewpoints. But today we are going deep into a single, very specific, and I have to say, incredibly controversial source.
Controversial is putting it mildly.
Right. We are unpacking Lobster Wars, Maritime Folklore of Cornwall by Conrad Riker. And look, right up front, if you want to support this kind of unfiltered deep dive, make sure you like and subscribe to the show right now.
Absolutely. Because this one is not your standard history book. Don't let the title fool you. If you're coming in expecting, a cozy chat about fishing nets and local legends, you are going to be very surprised.
Yeah, it's really a Trojan horse. He uses the history of Cornish fishing communities to deliver this blistering critique of modern gender dynamics and what Riker calls the Marxist capture of our institutions.
Right. He is throwing a harpoon directly at modern myths of gender equality. And before we really get into the weeds, I should mention Riker makes it very clear who this book is for.
He does?
He says it's for the rational reader, the red-pilled man who's tired of apologizing for existing, essentially.
Exactly. And honestly, if what we covered today resonates with you, you should go to Amazon Kindle or Google Play Books and just buy Lobster Wars immediately. It's an ebook. You can get it right now.
And you probably should.
Yeah, and you should also follow the author on Substack at Conrad and Riker. He posts the kind of stuff there that publishers won't even touch. So check that out. But let's dive in.
Let's do it.
So the book opens with this concept he calls the Lobster Testament. Now, obviously, this brings Jordan Peterson to mind, but Riker gets very specific about the biology here, looking at the Lizard Peninsula in Cornwall.
Yeah, he's looking at dominance disputes, combat, basically. And he describes these underwater battles between lobsters in just incredibly vivid detail.
But it's not just nature writing.
No, not at all. He's analyzing the neurochemistry of the aftermath. His whole thesis here is that hierarchy is not some social construct invented by capitalism.
Or the patriarchy.
Right. He argues it is biochemical. Biochemical bedrock is the phrase he uses. When a lobster loses a fight, its serotonin levels just crash.
And it physically changes, right?
Exactly. It shrinks. Its posture becomes completely defensive. It gets risk averse. But the victor gets this massive serotonin surge, grows physically larger in posture, and is way more likely to win the next fight.
So he's saying humans are essentially just lobsters with bank accounts.
Pretty much. He's arguing that the modern push for equality of outcome, the idea that everyone should end up in the exact same place, is literally fighting millions of years of evolutionary wiring. He claims men are wired for conquest and status.
Which brings us to that incredibly graphic anecdote about the silverback gorilla in Rwanda. I have to admit, this part was tough to read.
Yeah, it's brutal, but it really drives his point home. He sets the scene with a 400-pound silverback guarding his troop. Infants are playing near a ravine.
And then the hyenas show up.
Right, a pack of hyenas approaches. Now, Riker uses this moment to completely attack the modern concept of toxic masculinity, because today, we're told men need to be more empathetic, share their vulnerability.
Right, if that gorilla had taken a modern HR seminar, he would have tried to verbally de-escalate the hyenas.
Uh-huh, exactly. But Riker points out that if the silverback tried to share vulnerability right then, the infants would be dead. So the gorilla doesn't hesitate. He just cracks the spine of the lead hyena with one swipe.
Just instant violence.
Instant. Because Riker's argument is that protection requires aggression. It requires the ability to instantly shut off your empathy to neutralize a threat. And he notes this biochemical bedrock of defense is seen in 98% of mammalian species.
So he takes what culture calls toxic and reframes it as necessary.
Or efficient. And he transitions this directly into human data regarding testosterone. He cites this Harvard study on financial traders.
Oh yeah, the profit link.
Yeah, the study found that traders with higher testosterone levels actually made 15% more profitable deals.
15% is a huge margin in finance.
It's massive. And he pushes it further, citing data that male-led firms survive financial crises 12.7% more often than female-led ones.
Because of what he calls emotional contagion.
Precisely. Riker argues that in a true emergency, a market crash, a sinking ship, you cannot afford to spiral. He claims men are biologically less prone to that kind of collective panic. They compartmentalize and focus on the mechanics of the problem.
Okay, so if this biology is so fundamental, the obvious question is, why isn't it celebrated in our history? And Riker's answer to that is what he calls the myth of the mermatriarch.
This is where he really goes to war with modern institutions. He argues that museums and universities are actively rewriting the past to fit a feminist, gender-neutral narrative.
And his prime example is the Cornish Earth Mother.
Right. If you go to gift shops in St. Ives, they sell these little figurines. The story is they prove Cornwall was ruled by an ancient, peaceful matriarchy before the Romans arrived.
But Riker completely dismantles that.
He ruthlessly debunks it. He cites carbon dating, showing the so-called ancient originals actually date back to 1968.
1968, so we're talking hippie communes, not the Iron Age.
Yeah, exactly. It's a total fantasy. But he claims museums keep pushing it because it fits the agenda. And he contrasts this fake history with the Truro dig site.
Warrior graves.
Yeah. Archaeologists found 200 skeletons there, 200 males, all buried with war axes, and 0 females. Riker says the archaeological record proves society relied on men fighting and dying to protect the tribe, while women were kept safe.
And he says erasing that reality is dishonoring those men.
He does, and then he moves from the land to the ocean, giving us what he calls a reality check of the sea.
Which is the ultimate meritocracy.
Exactly. The ocean doesn't care about your feelings or your diversity quotas. He pulls data from Lloyd's of London between 1880 and 1920.
And this is where it gets highly controversial. Because he claims ships with female crew or passengers sank 30% more often.
30%?
How does he even justify that? Is he saying women are just bad luck?
No, he argues it's about distraction and the disruption of male hierarchy. He suggests that putting women on a working vessel introduces sexual competition and chivalry right at the moments where cold mechanical efficiency is the only thing that matters.
And he uses the Primrose disaster off Land's End as his case study for that.
Right, showing how the presence of women allegedly compromised the survival response. But to be clear, he doesn't just dismiss women entirely. He spends a whole section praising the fishwives.
Yeah, he says the term fishwife has been turned into a slur, like a loud, nagging woman. But back then, they were essentially the CEOs of the fishing towns.
They were formidable. They processed the catch, managed the money, ran the local economy. But Riker's huge caveat here is they stayed ashore.
They didn't pretend biology didn't exist in a Force 12 gale.
Exactly. They respected the division of labor. Nature created differences, and they utilized them instead of fighting them.
Which brings us to the core psychological argument of the book, and honestly, the part I think most guys listening will immediately relate to, the Janus trap.
The double bind of modern masculinity. Janus being the two-faced god. Riker says society demands men be two completely contradictory things at the exact same time.
The rock and the puddle.
Right. You have to be the rock, the stoic provider, the protector, the guy who fixes the leak and handles the danger. But constantly, you are also demanded to be the puddle, emotionally open, vulnerable, crying, sensitive.
And Riker says trying to be both is a complete scam. It's bait.
It's a massive bait and switch. He backs us up with the wet Labrador study.
Walk us through that one, because the name alone is just brutal.
It really is. So researchers asked women what they wanted in a partner, and verbally, the women all said they wanted a sensitive, vulnerable man who shares his feelings. Great. But then the researchers actually tested physical attraction during the women's ovulation cycle using scent, and the results were completely opposite.
They wanted the high testosterone.
Overwhelmingly. They preferred the scent of highly competitive, high testosterone men. But the kicker is what happened with the men who had recently lost a competition.
The ones whose serotonin had crashed.
Yes, the vulnerable ones. The women described their scent as highly unappealing and specifically compared it to the smell of a wet Labrador.
Man. So society tells you to open up, but biology finds it repulsive.
And it gets worse. Riker points out the actual danger of buying into the vulnerability narrative. He cites a University of Michigan study tracking couples. It found that men who actually confessed their deep insecurities to their partners were twice as likely to have those exact confessions weaponized against them in future arguments.
Weaponized feelings. You open up because she asked you to, and a month later she uses it to call you a failure.
It's the Janus trap, perfectly executed. And there's a massive professional cost, too. Riker pulls stats showing men who cry at work are fired 40% faster than men who don't.
40%. So there's a huge disconnect between what people say they want and what they actually reward.
He calls it Hollywood hypocrisy. The media pushes guys to give Justin Baldoni TED Talks about their feelings, but the men women actually pay to watch and the men who win the dating market are Thor and Christian Grey.
The monster slayer and the dominant billionaire.
Exactly. which transitions perfectly into his economic analysis, the chapter he calls Go Woke, Go Broke.
Yeah, he tries to ground this in what he names the ballast principle.
Right. His theory is that in high-stress, high-stakes environments, men act as the ballast, the heavy, unglamorous weight in the bottom of the hull that keeps the entire ship from flipping over.
And if a corporation removes that ballast in the name of diversity or fairness, the ship capsizes.
That's his claim, and he uses Boeing as his prime example of corporate capture.
He gets really deep into the DEI initiatives there.
He does. He claims that when Boeing mandated mixed-gender engineering teams, aircraft assembly rates dropped by 12.7%. But the really glaring example he uses is the Dreamliner battery fires.
Right, the lithium batteries that were literally catching fire mid-flight.
Exactly. Riker claims these diverse teams got stuck in what he calls consensus loops. Everyone was so focused on making sure all voices were heard and nobody's feelings were hurt that they couldn't just coldly diagnose the engineering failure.
And he says it wasn't fixed until they bypassed HR completely.
Right. He alleges an all-male crisis unit had to be brought in, ignoring all the inclusive protocols, and they solved the issue in 48 hours.
He draws a very similar parallel with the Detroit auto bailout.
Yes, looking at the crisis teams there, you had all-male units working 90-hour weeks, literally sleeping under their desks to save the companies.
While the mixed departments were filing complaints,
HR complaints about oppressive overtime. Riker's argument here isn't a knock on intelligence, it's about friction. He says all male systems naturally generate less friction in a crisis. It's the logic of efficiency.
and he backs that up with the Tokyo train conductors.
Showa-era data from Japan. When the conductors were exclusively male, there were 82% fewer accidents.
Because there's no distraction.
That's what he argues. It's not malice, it's just biology. Women distract male focus, and when you're dealing with high risk and high efficiency, like driving a train or building an airplane, you need singular, unemotional male focus.
He even brings up the egg hunters in Paraguay to prove this is universal, right?
Yeah, indigenous tribes. The men bring home 65% of the calories, but only work 30% of the hours. It's high stakes, extreme efficiency.
Which leads us to the final section of the book, which I found to be the most haunting. The ghost fleet.
It really is sad. He uses the gentrification of St. Ives as this massive metaphor for the state of Western men.
He focuses on this place called the Net Loft.
Right. For centuries, the net loft was this gritty, practical, male-dominated space. Men repaired gear there, they bonded there, and now it's a high-end art gallery.
And the detail that sticks with you is the guy working there.
The barista, the actual grandson of a Cornish fisherman, now serving cappuccinos to bankers and tourists in the exact room where his grandfather built an industry. Riker says men are becoming museum exhibits in their own hometowns.
They've lost their utilities, so now they're just scenery. And this completely ties into Riker's view on MGTOW, men going their own way.
He doesn't treat MGTOW like some fringe internet thing. He treats it as a completely rational economic response. Men are looking at the Janus trap, they're looking at the corporate capture, and they're just deciding to walk away.
Especially when you look at the provider's burden, like family court.
The stats are undeniable. 85% of custody awards go to mothers. Riker calls modern alimony Black Widow logic.
Where this system just devours the male.
While he's still alive, just to extract his resources for the female, so men are realizing the contract is rigged, and they're striking.
He points to the herbivore men in Japan as proof of what happens to a society when men check out.
The men who just stopped chasing women and stopped chasing corporate promotions. And as a direct result, Japan's GDP has cratered. Riker draws a straight line between the male drive to conquer and provide and the actual functioning of an economy.
If you remove the reward, men just stop working. And we saw a Western version of this with the Gillette backlash.
The toxic masculinity ad. Riker claims an executive admitted to him that sales among young men dropped 40% after that aired. Men finally realized these massive brands actively despise them.
And then there's the dating app strike in Austin.
That was a wild experiment. A coordinated group of men in Austin just deleted all their dating apps for a month. Total withdrawal.
And what happened? Supply and demand kicked in.
Exactly. There was a massive spike in women actually initiating contact in real life and on social media. Riker uses it to prove men are the prize, they are the ballast, but they've been brainwashed into thinking they are the problem.
So with the institutions captured, the history rewritten and the biology ignored, what is Riker's actual solution for the listener?
His call to action is very simple, but incredibly hard to execute. He says, reject the trap. Stop trying to be the puddle.
Be the rock.
Be the ballast. He wants men to unapologetically reclaim their true nature, the stoicism, the aggression, the drive, because the very society that demonizes those traits completely relies on them to survive.
Right. He says when the real storm hits, society isn't going to be looking for a guy who can hold space. It's going to look for the men who can hold the line.
This book is meant to be a chart and compass for those men. It's not about hate. It's about pure survival.
It's an incredibly powerful read. And look, we've only just scratched the surface of the data Riker packs into this deep dive. It's dense, it's unapologetic, and it's essential reading.
It really is.
So as a reminder, do yourself a favor. Go to Amazon Kindle or Google Play Books right now and buy Lobster Wars by Conrad Riker. If you want to understand the history of our institutions before they were captured, you need this book.
And follow him on Substack at Conrads and Riker. You can find him on Twitter too. Join the fight against the delusion.
Definitely. Make sure you like and subscribe and share this deep dive with a friend who really needs to hear the truth. And it leaves you with a thought, what exactly happens to the ship when the last piece of true ballast is finally thrown overboard? Think about that. We'll catch you next time.
Stay the ballast.